Previously, I discussed the Greek trio of Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle who influenced Western philosophy. The three most famous Eastern philosophers were Lao Tzu, the founder of Taoism, the Buddha, the founder of Buddhism, and Confucius, the founder of Confucianism. I'll mainly focus on their philosophies and less on their religious practices, which are quite different in different countries. Eastern philosophical tradition is very rich and complex, so these three philosophers can help us shed light on Eastern spirituality. Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu or Laozi lived in 6th century BCE in China. He is said to be the author of the Tao Te Ching or Tao Te Ching, which is the foundational text of Taoism, a philosophy that traces its origin to shamanism and hermeticism. Taoism, which is also sometimes called Taoism, literally means the way or the enlightened path or nature's way, which is a spontaneous, eternal, and an unnameable and undefinable. Quote, "Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. It is simply the flow of the universe, such as gravity allowing rivers to flow downward without an effort." The core idea of Taoism is the doctrine of Wu Wei, which can be translated as non-resistance or action through inaction. Wei means purposeful and intentional, while Wu means there is no or lacking. So literally it means there is no purposeful act. A good metaphor for humans to live their lives by is river, which the Chinese civilizations relied on. Rivers flow downward. If hindered by a rock, instead of moving the rock, they flow around it. This means we should live our lives in alignment or harmoniously with nature, not against nature. Another important idea of Taoism is yin and yang, or good and evil, which live together inside everyone, as we all have the dark and light. You cannot separate the two. I think this fundamentally differs from a Western religion, so good and evil are thought to be separate entities. However, according to Taoism, there are two sides of the same coin. Everything is neither completely negative nor positive, but a bit of both. In other words, a saint has his sins and a sinner has his redeeming qualities. In Taoism, humans are one manifestation of the Tao or the way. You could say just one species among millions of other species. Lao Tzu emphasized not to follow one's desires, goals, or ambitions, but rather find your natural flow. Ziyan, which literally means naturally, is a Taoist value which emphasizes natural creativity and spontaneity. As a result, Taoism is seen as the religion of the artists who live a more intuitive and spontaneous life that mimics nature's flow. You could even make a connection between Carl Jung's psychology of the collective subconscious, deeply embedded memories of our species or those species before that artists tap into by finding the flow of nature. This artistic flow is much more elaborated in another book titled Zhuangzi, supposedly authored by another important figure in Taoism, a man called Zhuangzi. The book has many humorous stories, allegories, and anecdotes, with the most famous one being the butterfly dream, in which Zhuangzi wakes up one morning from a dream in which he turned into a butterfly. Now he is perplexed and asks this mind-blowing question: was he dreaming of a butterfly or a butterfly dreaming Zhuangzi? The answer is not important here, but the question itself is the main point. We humans seek clear answers and clarity, but nature doesn't care about separate entities or separation of different species. Nature is one big perpetual flow. From nature's perspective, a human and butterfly are simply two different manifestations of the same thing. Even the state of being awake and dreaming are false distinctions or dichotomy because they are one and the same thing. For example, artists, novelists, musicians often dream or daydream their best works because they find the flow of nature's collective subconsciousness. Laozi is said to have lived during the Zhou dynasty, whose capital was close to the Yellow River. Therefore, the river is often used as a metaphor for Taoism. Later in life, Laozi is said to have traveled west, where he wrote Tao Te Ching in some remote mountains and then vanished into thin air. Also a great metaphor on how to flow in life like a wind and river. Today, Laozi's ideas are extremely important, but also deeply embedded into the cultures of China, Korea, and Japan. To give you an example, people in Japan tend to be less confrontational, tend to avoid conflict, which fits in with the Taoist idea of non-resistance. So to sum up, Lao Tzu or Taoism philosophy centers on the idea of not going against the natural flow, but flowing with it. Not resisting nature's way, but going with it. Buddha. Siddhartha Gautama, or the Buddha, lived a luxurious life in a rich northern Indian family between 563 and 483 BCE. But he wasn't happy. He learned that suffering was universal among the poor, rich, young and old men and women. But why do we suffer? The reason we suffer is because of our desires for pleasure. The more we get, the more we want. If we have a big house, next time we will not be fulfilled if we don't get an even bigger house. Bigger cars, more partners, more wealth, friends, subscribers, followers. At no point in our life we can satisfactorily say it is enough. A good example is addiction. If a small dose makes you high today, but you need a larger dose to give you the same high a month later or a year later. In other words, as you experience more, your desires also grow bigger. So life is just an endless cycle of desire, fulfillment of that desire, and more desires. How do we solve this problem? To ease suffering, according to Buddhism, we should nip our wants in the bud by detaching ourselves from our desires for worldly possessions. Don't chase things and be happy in the moment. But it's easier said than done. Everyone says it's a good idea to be content with what you have right now. But curbing your desire is not an easy job. Why is it so hard? Here's when Buddhism gets really interesting and profoundly deep. We all think we are who we are. We have a sense of the self we call me and you. We think it's somewhat solid entity. In Western religions, this self is imparted to us from God. It's real. This individual self is genuine and for the most part unchangeable. According to Buddhism, however, you are wrong. Why? The self or ego is not real. It's just an illusion or a mirage or a temporary imposter attached to your body. You could say like a parasite, it lives on you. What does it do inside us? This imposter self fuels our desires, ambitions, and goals. In other words, it uses us to go out in the world and achieve things, but at the end of the day, we still don't feel fulfilled. Especially when we achieve everything and death hits us. We lose our shit because we went to so much trouble acquiring our wealth, fame, power, and now death is snatching all away from us. It's a bad deal. So what is the solution, Mr. Buddha? His answer might shock you. According to Buddhism, to be truly enlightened and blissful, you have to achieve the nirvana stage, which means we must kill the imposter self. This thing we call the self or ego is the source of all our desires. To not desire anything, we must remove the self. According to Buddhism, our soul is the real thing and also very much universal, while the self is a kind of picture we put in our head every time we are born in our various reincarnations. One way to understand this is perhaps through Mr. Plato, who also said that the idea of things is the perfect form and the real things on the outside is a mere shadow of the real thing. In Buddhism, your soul is genuine, eternal, and universal, while your body or ego are temporary and fleeting. We're not separate from the universe, but a tiny part of a big whole. To become happy and one with the universe, you must detach yourself from your desires and kill the self through meditation, solitude, and rigorous physical and mental discipline. Quote, "A disciplined mind brings happiness." This is very similar to Arthur Schopenhauer's philosophy of the blind universal will, which is a force beyond our control, yet it rules most of what we do in life. There's a disagreement whether Schopenhauer reached the same conclusion independent of Buddhism or Hinduism, or he was influenced by these Indian philosophies. I'll discuss Schopenhauer's philosophy in more detail later on. So according to Buddhism, to be truly enlightened is to not see yourself as a separate self, but part of a bigger whole. Part of conscious universe. So true inner peace comes not from outside, for example by achieving your goals, but from inside once you become enlightened. Buddha's teachings through various forms of Buddhism are incredibly important in most of East Asia. Buddhism has also become one of the most influential philosophies in the West too, as it emphasizes individual inner journey rather than collective prayers in a church. So to sum up, Buddha was a rich, powerful prince but wasn't fulfilled in life and realized that all humans suffer because of our desires. To ease suffering, we should detach ourselves from our desires, and to be truly blissful, we should eliminate the self or ego through meditation and mental discipline. Confucius. While both Laozi and the Buddha escaped society for some solitude and inner peace, Confucius, who lived between 551 and 479 BCE, however, tried to solve the practical socio-political questions like how we can live politically and socially together in peace and harmony, or how to organize society in a way that is peaceful. So his philosophy is less individualistic but more concerned about the collective existence, especially in big cities and countries. To find a great solution for socio-political coexistence, Confucius looked at how nature organizes things, especially in the animal kingdom. One of the biggest problems and the main source of wars and violence in human society is when there's confusion as to who stands where, who gets what, who owns what, who is responsible for what. He understood that the best method was the natural hierarchy or a pyramid social system. Without an established system of hierarchy or authority, there's chaos and confusion. And hierarchy allows everyone to know their place, so there is no confusion or conflict as to which chair belongs to who. Removing social confusion was Confucius's main task, pun intended. Now, not only everyone knows their own place, they also know other people's places too. So instead of a police watching everyone or patrolling the whole society, now everyone can watch each other. If someone sits in the wrong chair, other people can tell him it is not his seat. So if everyone knows their place, everyone can watch everyone, so nobody dares to disrupt the social harmony. So kings are at the top of the pyramid and everyone else take their place based on their ranks and age, just like a game of chess. Perhaps the most logical game humans have invented. Confucius also realized that everything starts in the family because it's the first line of defense against chaos. A solid family structure means a solid foundation for society. Inside the family, the man is at the top, then wife, then sons, and then daughters. One of the most common criticisms against Confucius is the possibility of tyranny. Those in positions of power can abuse it. Confucius also emphasized responsibility and duty. Those at the top are responsible to protect those below them. A king is responsible to keep people safe, and a man in the family is responsible to protect and provide for his wife and children. Those below, in return, are loyal and follow their superiors and do as asked. To understand Confucianism, you should look things not just from an individual point of view, but from a collective perspective. For example, if your body parts didn't function in alignment with the rest of your body, you are sick and needs treatment. Society is the same. If one or few members push things in the opposite direction, there's violence, which is a social illness. You might think it's pretty outdated, but you would be surprised that this Confucian hierarchy is a pretty efficient system which is at work in modern companies. Because we hear this cliche that no work is done by a committee, which is true in most situations. Most corporate structures follow a strict and rigid hierarchy and a chain of command. In the animal kingdom, a hierarchy is often achieved through violence. But Confucius says since it's natural, we might as well adopt it to reduce violence. Of course, in the modern age, revolutions are a common occurrence. Those at the bottom rebel against the establishment. That's why Confucius emphasized duty and responsibility. When a ruler becomes tyrannical, he fails his duty. It all comes down to respecting your role in society. Quote, "Without feelings of respect, what is there to distinguish men from beasts?" Today, China, Korea, and Japan have adopted these Confucian methods in sorting out social situations where seniority and juniority plays a major role in schools, universities, and companies. Loyalty and respect are significant in Confucianism, but also meritocracy. As a result, traditionally, China had a strict civil service examination for centuries, and only the very bright and intelligent were recruited for high military and government jobs. In the 20th century, however, Mao Zedong, the egalitarian socialist, tried to dismantle the Confucian class hierarchy through the Cultural Revolution. That caused great pain for a lot of people. But of course, the Chinese Communist Party replaced the old class-based Confucian hierarchy with a political hierarchy. Many economists attribute China's rapid economic development to this efficient hierarchical system, as China was run like a company, the president being the CEO of China. Things get done quickly, but of course it also comes at a cost of many voices being suppressed. Traditionally, the Chinese Communist Party used to distance itself from the archaic Confucius philosophy because it contradicts the egalitarian philosophy of socialism, in which everyone is equal and there's no hierarchy, at least on paper. But in reality, every human society has been hierarchical. Even today, China is slowly moving towards a more Confucian philosophy. As China is developing, not only it's utilizing a Confucian hierarchy for its efficiency, but it also cultivating a more robust culture of meritocracy and traditional masculinity, which were centered on Confucian philosophy. To sum up, Laozi's teaching is not to resist or destroy or go against nature, but to flow with nature. As a result, he says we should be more intuitive and spontaneous. In other words, humans are of nature, so it's time we forget our humanness and live in the flow of nature. The Buddha taught that suffering is universal because of our goals, desires, and ambitions. To find true peace is to look inside, not outside material success. And to be truly happy is to kill your ego or the self that has ambition and desires. Confucius tackled the socio-political question of how to live a peaceful coexistence through a hierarchical system in which everyone knows their place and position in society. While the Greeks were questioning truth, authority, poking holes at the natural world to understand its property, those in the East were seeking a harmonious life with nature, not only with other humans, but with all creatures on earth. The Greeks disagreed with each other, while the Asians tried to find agreement, consensus, not only among humans, but also between humans and the natural world. The fact these three figures founded a religion of their own, while the three Greeks did not, show the fundamental difference between Eastern and Western philosophy. In the East, societies are generally more group-centered, while in the West, it's more individual-centered. But if you really think about it, the philosophies of these three Eastern thinkers is highly individualized. They put the emphasis on the individual to take charge of themselves. Don't change the world, change yourself. So while Eastern social fabric is communitarian, the philosophies are individualistic, as they put demand on the individual to take responsibility for changing themselves. So they adapt to the society they live in. Don't change others, but yourself. Don't change nature, but yourself. The Greeks, however, focused on how to change nature as quickly, efficiently as possible. So in the West, individuality is static, God-given, or born, while social fabric is dynamic. In other words, in Western philosophy, the individual is solid and the society and nature malleable and changeable. In the East, however, nature is, as well as society's fabrics, are static, while the individual is changeable. In other words, do not attempt to change others or nature, because it's easier to change yourself. If you cannot fit in with others, take a good look at yourself and find what's wrong with you. People in the East are less likely to complain about the world, instead try to adapt to the world. Before you complain that I'm generalizing too much, sit back and relax and look at yourself in the mirror. Don't worry, I'm kidding. Next, I'll discuss two distinct approaches to philosophy. Animalism, that sees humans as animals, therefore needed to be herded to bring order, and humanism, that sees all humans as equal to one another. In other words, elitism versus egalitarianism, or carnivorous versus herbivorous philosophies.